Imagine sinking below the surface of the ancient ocean. As you descend, the blue light of the surface doesn't just fade, it is swallowed. The water around you hums with strange low-frequency vibrations that you feel in your chest more than you hear in your ears. You cannot see the bottom, but you can feel the displacement of the water, a heavy, rhythmic current shifting from the sheer, unseen mass of something moving just beyond the reach of your vision. In this world, there is no cover. There is no place to hide. Our collective imagination is dominated by the giants of the land. We picture the Tyrannosaurus and the Triceratops as the definitive symbols of prehistoric danger. But long before a single reptile took its first tentative step onto the mud of a coastline, the oceans had already spent hundreds of millions of years refining the art of the kill. The terrestrial world was a silent, empty wasteland, but the waters below were already home to a density of predators that makes our modern ocean seem like a sanctuary. This ancient ocean was a biological vacuum of survival. On land, an animal can find a cave or climb a tree, but here, life exists in a three-dimensional arena where an attack can come from any direction, including directly beneath you. It was Earth's first true battleground, where the environment itself dictated a ruthless survival mandate. You either developed the sensory equipment to detect a killer, or you became the sustenance that fueled its growth. This raises a question that scientists have spent decades piecing together from fragments of stone and bone. What exactly was moving through this darkness? Before the age of the shark or the whale, what kind of biological nightmares occupied the apex of the food chain in an era that time has nearly forgotten? This environment functioned as a high-pressure laboratory for evolution. The constant, unrelenting threat of predation forced life to innovate at a staggering pace, engineering specialized anatomical weapons to overcome the defenses of others. The oceans belonged to monsters that operated on biological principles entirely different from anything alive today. The marine arms race began on the prehistoric seafloor, long before the evolution of a backbone. The dawn of the Cambrian era saw the rise of the first true superpredators, creatures like Anomalocaris. While its contemporaries were little more than crawling scavengers, this animal pioneered the mechanics of the active hunt, utilizing a body plan designed specifically for the pursuit and capture of living prey. This schematic reveals why Anomalocaris held such a decisive advantage. It possessed highly complex compound eyes, providing a visual range and clarity that its prey simply couldn't match. Combined with its front-mounted grasping appendages, which could reach out and snatch soft-bodied animals from the water column, it became the first undisputed ruler of the sea. It could see what it was hunting long before the target was even aware a predator was in the vicinity. The dominance of these early arthropods triggered a massive shift in defensive biology. Prey species began absorbing calcium and other minerals from the water, encasing their vulnerable bodies in dense protective armor. Within a few million years, the soft-bodied world had transformed into a landscape of walking tanks, sporting thick shells and sharp spines designed to make them impossible to swallow. Nature's response to this armored defense was a massive increase in raw mechanical bite force. This led to the rise of Dunkleosteus, a fish that looked more like a piece of heavy machinery than a living animal. It lacked traditional teeth. Instead, its skull was equipped with massive, self-sharpening bony plates that acted like industrial shears, capable of slicing through even the most heavily reinforced shells. The mechanics of a Dunkleosteus strike were as much about physics as they were about biology. By utilizing a unique 4-bar linkage hinge in its skull, it could snap its mouth open in just 1/50th of a second. This movement was so violent it created a sudden vacuum in the water, a powerful suction that pulled prey directly into its shearing jaws before the victim could even attempt to swim away. As armored prey grew tougher, predators grew more powerful to compensate. But this cycle eventually hit a wall. When an environment becomes so fiercely competitive that even industrial-strength bite force and vacuum-assisted strikes aren't enough to secure a meal, evolution is forced to look for a different kind of advantage. This cycle of adaptation pushed marine life toward a scale of existence that defied the limits of the terrestrial world. In the water, an animal is not restricted by the same gravitational forces that limit the size of a land-based predator. This allowed for a massive expansion in physical mass, leading to a world of giants where survival was determined by who could grow the largest and move the fastest through the weightless depths. The next era saw the arrival of massive marine reptiles, creatures that returned to the water from land to claim the open ocean. Predators like Liopleurodon became the new masters of the prehistoric kill zone. They were built for the high seas ambush, possessing the lung capacity and muscular endurance to track prey across vast open distances. Examining a fossilized skeleton of this magnitude provides a visceral sense of the scale these reptiles achieved. The secret to their agility lies in these 4 paddle-like bones. Placed next to a modern human or a great white shark, they would appear as a mere snack for a predator this size. Most marine predators rely on a single tail for propulsion, but these reptiles utilized all 4 flippers in a synchronized, flight-like motion through the water. This biomechanical setup allowed them to launch into a sudden, explosive burst of speed, turning a 20-ton animal into a high-speed projectile that could intercept a target before it had time to react. An ecosystem supporting entire populations of these massive reptiles would eventually produce something at the very top of the food chain. Nature had the caloric fuel to support a predator that would eventually push the limits of shark biology to their absolute extreme. This animal was the Megalodon. While popular culture has turned this shark into a cinematic monster, the actual paleontological data reveals a creature far more interesting than any movie. Filtering out internet myths, the fossil record reveals an animal that functioned as the primary regulator of the ocean's largest inhabitants. Because sharks have cartilaginous skeletons, they don't leave behind full frames, they leave behind these. Each tooth was built with fine, serrated edges, designed to saw through the thick blubber and bone of large whales. By measuring the width and mass of these teeth, scientists have estimated an animal that could reach lengths of over 50 feet, possessing a bite force that makes every other creature in this story seem fragile by comparison. Megalodon occupied the absolute top of this millions of years-long arms race. Its combination of massive size and unparalleled bite force meant that within its specific environmental window, it had no biological rivals. It was the final result of an evolutionary process that had been perfecting the shark body plan since before the first tree grew on Earth. Despite being undefeated in combat and biologically optimized for their environment, these giants are no longer here. The fossils we find today are the only evidence they ever existed. If these apex predators were effectively invincible in their own time, what could possibly have wiped them out? The collapse didn't come from a rival animal, but from the planet itself. Dramatic environmental shifts began to reshake the world. Falling sea levels drained the shallow, warm coastal waters where these predators raised their young. Shifting ocean currents began to move the nutrient-rich water away from traditional hunting grounds, and a cooling climate began to turn the tropical seas into a cold, inhospitable expanse. This reveals the hidden cost of the evolutionary arms race. The massive physical size that made these titans invincible also made them vulnerable. A 50-foot body requires a massive, constant, and highly specialized food supply. As the environment changed and the smaller animals at the bottom of the food chain died off or migrated, the giants found themselves in a world that could no longer provide the thousands of pounds of meat they needed every single day to survive. The frantic, violent hunt that had defined the oceans for millions of years was replaced by a slow starvation. One by one, the largest inhabitants of the sea began to disappear, their bodies sinking to the floor to be slowly covered by the silt and debris of a changing world. The monsters of the prehistoric ocean weren't defeated by a superior hunter. They were victims of their own success, outpaced by the shifting geology and climate of a planet that was moving into a new era, leaving only these small stone fragments behind. Returning to the present day, we find that our modern ocean is still a place of profound mystery. Despite our advancements in satellite mapping and sonar, over 80% of the underwater world remains entirely unseen by human eyes. a vast, dark frontier that sits right on our doorstep. It is an unsettling reality that we have mapped the surface of the moon with greater precision than the trenches of our own planet. We look to the stars to find strange, alien life, while the deepest parts of our own world remain a black box, largely unexplored and poorly understood. Every time we pull a specimen like this from the abyss, it serves as a reminder that the ocean still supports large-scale predators. These biological discoveries prove that the deep water still has the capacity to sustain life forms that resemble the ancient hunters of the past. When you consider the sheer volume of unexplored water covering our planet, you have to wonder what else is still hiding in that impenetrable blackness. What other remnants of the ancient arms race are moving through the deep trenches, far beyond the reach of our lights? The greatest monsters in Earth's history never walked on land. They ruled the oceans, and in the deepest, darkest corners of the world, they may still leave their mark. If you want to continue exploring the forgotten mysteries of prehistory, subscribe and join us for the next descent. And tell us in the comments, if you could safely see one of these ancient creatures in the wild, which would it be?